All my favourite writers and artists, they're not making anything anymore. What I've noticed is I've felt this pull to almost fill the space that they've vacated. I feel like Bukowski died in 93, Christos Chelskis, he wrote his last, well, according to me, great novel maybe 10 or even 20 years ago, and he's not writing that stuff anymore. There's Michael Leunig, who I still love, and he'll still pull out something that's absolutely crazy good once or twice a year. His purple patch for me was maybe the 90s, even the early 2000s. Maybe that's because I was much younger and I hadn't seen as much stuff, but he's still producing stuff that I love. There's David Lynch, who he produces stuff every now and again, but not as frequently as I'd love him to. But yeah, there's this big space, and I keep feeling like I want them to write a new book. I want them to make a new movie, and they're not. They're not making anything new. Nothing's happening. Everyone's gone quiet. And so I feel like there's this massive space to fill, and I'll never do it justice, but I feel like it's calling me to have a crack, take the threads of my 5 favourite people, bundle them into a fist and try and make a rope out of it with my own life experience of hundreds of thousands of micro-observations that I've earned for existing for 50 years. That's what I feel like. I feel like you earn your life. I feel like all these hundreds of thousands of micro-observations, they all go into this mulch heap of bullshit, and they help create being able to recognise patterns. I always felt like creativity is just some sort of pattern recognition. But it's hard to notice what isn't there. So there's this big gaping hole that they've left, that my favourite writers have left for me. It's only recently that I've noticed that, they're not making anything anymore. It's all gone. And so I feel like, this need to come in and become part of that great tradition. My favourite artists, I share almost the same kind of worldview of my 5 or 6 or 7 favourite artists, just with my own experience added onto that. I love how you can take your favourite artists, you can almost find the similarities between them. Like, for instance, David Lynch and Charles Bukowski were in the same room at one point in the 80s. I remember discovering, and even Bukowski's favourite film was David Lynch's Eraserhead. I love that when there's a crossover between your favourite heroes, like there's a rich vein of gold. One of my favourite things to do actually is take 2 of your favourite artists, for instance, put them in the same Google search and check out all the Reddit forums or whatever that comes up, or the articles that they share in the same place at the same time. I feel like you can learn a lot from that. You can almost... something interesting happens with that. But they say write the book that you want to read. And so I feel like that's what I've been doing. Finally, in the last few years, I'm writing the book that I've been wanting to read, because my favourite people aren't doing it anymore. And I feel like my influences were kind of like training wheels. I rode them all the way up until I was maybe late 30s. Even early 40s, and then ditched them until I was riding a bicycle on my own and creating my own voice. It's like you could write your way into your own voice. And so for the last 10 years, I've been discovering this voice without the trainer wheels of any worldview, my own take on things. And all of a sudden, I'm looking back and discovering that I'm part of this great tradition of my favourite people that I've almost I've been brought up by them. They've saved me in my 20s, my 30s. I feel like I'm part of this weird, great tradition where I share their worldview, but also I'm completely my own person at the same time. And the only way to have earned my own voice was just simply to exist for a long time, till I was nearly fucking 50. And I also love following the lineage, I don't know how you say that word, but the influences of my influences, and following back through the ages. I love how the internet sort of allows you easy access now to do that sort of shit. Looking at all the 60s weird French films, new wave shit that David Lynch was inspired by and then made it his own. Looking at how Bukowski updated D.H. Lawrence writing from the 1920s and for a new time, and totally made it his own, even though there's some things are so identical, but he's said it in his own voice. I love how that's the same kind of truths live on. It's funny, I find these days how a lot of our culture doesn't give a shit about history. It feels like there are some generations that think, oh, we're here and we're going to change everything. We're going to make it all better, but not knowing that that's what every generation's thought. What makes you the exceptional generation, except for the fact that you're just born? I feel like it's ridiculous. There's kind of an arrogance, inbuilt arrogance into humans that always thinks we're the special odd one out that's going to change everything until they discover they can't, because your parents passed that DNA on to you. But it is fun looking at how my influences were influenced and exploring that family tree of the great tradition of my favourite artists. And I love the crossovers. I love how I've discovered other artists through doing that as well. And you go, this is where I fit in. This is how it all works. I'm totally part of a tradition, but also my own person as well, because all humans are the same. It's just the culture around us that changes. We're all the dumb same reptile brain kind of person, but it's the weird culture that changes us just slightly. It's always a different weird culture. But yeah, like when I was writing my last book, I was I was thinking about Christos Chelska's book Loaded. He wrote back in 99, last century now. So I only read that 10 years ago and I thought, well, this is fucking amazing. It's so good. And then I read Catcher in the Rye late in my life and realised that was kind of an updated version of that. And then Catcher in the Rye almost goes back to D.H. Lawrence a bit as well, and that kind of, and even the Russian writers. And it's fucking, yeah, it fascinates me how we all fit into this weird great tradition. And that's why I've been thinking recently, my favourite writers aren't writing anymore. Christos Chelskis he's kind of touching on those things, but he doesn't have the fury and rage that he once had. That was like, fuck yeah, you wanted to pump a fist into the air because he was just saying brutal things. And now he's a bit more coy and cautious. Michael Luniga will still say something that will get him into trouble, in inverted commas, which I fucking love. But yeah, it was recently that I sort of thought, hey, there's this big void being left. The artists aren't saying, they're not following this great tradition anymore. There's nothing being said. There's nothing real being said. And I felt like there's that great void for me to step into. And not that I'm comparing myself to these people, but it's a void that I wanted to step into and do my best with. Yeah, it spins me out because it took me to notice what wasn't there. And it's hard to notice what isn't there, that big void. But I felt like in the last 2 or 3 years, this weird culture has been almost it came in the perfect time in my life to almost arrive into myself. There was something massive to push back against. I feel like this weird new culture that's kind of totalitarian and you're not allowed to say certain things and everything's a sacred cow. I feel like it couldn't be a better time to sort of become a writer or be an artist. It's nuts. And so I feel like it just came at the right time, 10 years into me sort of writing myself into my own voice and this culture happening at the same time. It's like, couldn't be better. But anyway, I'm talking shit. But yeah, what I was saying earlier, find your favourite artists, put 2 of them into the same Google search and check out what articles they might appear in and find out their relationships. I found that personally really helpful in the development of just making stuff, even to say how I see the world. I found that real sort of semi-influential on my stuff, especially in my 30s, just before I was starting to write myself into my own voice. But I still do it sometimes. I'll check out the family trees of things and how they all fit in the ecosystem of these great traditions. But anyway, I feel like this is a bit of a self-indulgent episode, but if you feel like leaving a review, I'd love it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening to it. Ta.